Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Quarantine at Harvard. We're so excited to have you here. Today I will be co-hosting along with Anna Farinay. Anna, if you want to introduce yourself really quick.
Yeah, hi everyone. I have been on the podcast in a little bit of time, but I'm really excited to be here with two special guests, Jasmine and Ebony.
And yeah, so a little background about these two. They actually were together in the summer of 2018 at Cornell and actually hosted their own podcast there together. So we are super excited to have them on here, and I will pass it to them to give their own introductions.
Okay, I'll go. Hi, I'm Jasmine. I'm a first year at the college. I'm from Chicago and not really sure what I want to study because I'm kind of having a crisis at this moment. But it was government yesterday. It's not government today. But that's all right. It's a learning curve. And yeah. So Ebony, on to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ebony. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, Beantown represent. And sort of like Jasmine, I'm kind of going through this sort of what am I going to study phase. But right now, I think it's government, and I think it's going to stay that way for a while. Shout out to Professor Levitsky. He's like really carrying me. It's great to be here. I'm so excited to talk to you guys today.
Yeah, that's super awesome. So I guess just to get us started, obviously the theme of this podcast is quarantine at Harvard. So we'd like to talk to you guys just about the campus life so far, and if there's anything particular about the situation that you want to talk about.
Being quarantined, well, the quarantine period is over, even though I guess we're still going through getting regularly tested and all that. It's been awkward to say the least. It's been a lot of awkward glances behind your mask, trying to smile, trying to notice who is who, and like you think that there's a certain person like someone completely different and you wave at a stranger. But overall it hasn't been horrible and I'm thankful to be on campus. So there's not much to complain about. I mean there is, but I'm not gonna complain about it.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as Jasmine. Really excited to be on campus. I think it's giving me the motivation to do my work and to do it well. I will say though that the only places I've really been to are Annenberg and my dorm. I hang out with about like 3 to 5 people, and I don't know. I feel like sometimes meeting new people requires forwardness. It's very weird to go up to someone and ask for their phone number. But I've done it a few times, and it's how I'm making friends. So it's very much awkward, very much weird. But I think it works. It works if the other person is just as weird.
No, that makes sense. What have been your experiences in like actually, Ebony, you're from Boston. Why haven't you been out into the city? Are you just bored of
I
it,
am.
tired of it?
Yeah, I am from Boston. So Boston, I love Boston. Don't get me wrong. But I'm so excited to not be in Boston right now. I think Cambridge is giving me a different vibe. I do go to Boston like every weekend to like visit my mom or my dad. Um, but I don't know, Boston just is not offering me anything new lately. But yeah, I'm super excited still to like bring some of my friends to Boston, go shopping with them, introduce them to like the hole in the wall restaurants. That's really cool. But I think I'm sort of over the I'm from Boston phase, and now I just really want to explore Cambridge.
Yeah, that's fair. Honestly, I'll admit I'm always in Boston. I have no idea why. um, but I really like the city. I kind of like it more than Cambridge. Um,
Mm.
I sneak into like the BU library. Okay, not the BU library, the BU
Oh,
Student Union. Um, to do my homework because I just can't stand being in my dorm anymore. So yeah, I don't know. I like the city a lot. Cambridge is
yeah.
fun.
It is, it is. You know, the city lights, they hit at night. When you're on the bridge and you're walking,
Mhm.
as soon as the sun sets, yeah, Boston hits. It really does.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I am in a river house, and so I went to the river out one time just to have like dinner, and I was just watching like the sunset, and I was also watching the moon set too. It's a very strange experience. Like I just saw the moon in the sky, and my friend and I, we were having a socially distanced picnic, and we were just like I thought the moon was like up there and to the left, and then we just watched it like go under the bridge. We were like, well, goodbye, moon. But yeah, it's definitely. I haven't been into Boston yet, but so far the scenery is lovely here. So
Yeah, very cute. Very cute. So, Jasmine, you talking about your concentration. Why have you been switching so much from government to other concentration?
I wasn't switching at all until yesterday. I don't know. Like, I just feel like, I mean, it's okay to switch. Like, I think 2/3 of freshmen switch their concentrations or majors, like in their college career. I just don't know if I'm as equipped to study government as I thought I was. I think it's a little bit out of my league right now. But good thing is that I'm finding other interests in the other departments. Like, I think I'm really finding a new interest in philosophy, which I never got a chance to take a philosophy class in high school, but I'm taking one now, and I'm like the way Ebony is obsessed with Hum 10. I'm obsessed with this philosophy class. Like I literally, it's a freshman seminar, so it's only once a week, but I am obsessed with that. I wish it was more often.
That's great. What's the seminar?
It's a freshman seminar on Nietzsche, the German philosopher, and it's
Oh,
like
it's kind of
it's
sad.
a top tier
Nietzsche's very-
class. Nietzsche's very
Wow.
funny. I find him hilarious.
wow, that's awesome. Yeah. So I guess like going into another question. So Ebony, is it true that you have your own blog and run your own blog?
Is it true? Yes, it is definitely true. I will say that the last 3 weeks I have been, I don't want to say slacking, but for lack of a better word, slacking, just because I have been super busy with my classes. But yes, I have a blog, um, ebonyisonline.com, and there I just talk about a lot of things from racism to makeup to the Black Lives Matter movement to college acceptance letters. And really, the whole principle of my blog is rating things out of 5 stars. So I think, oh yes, I am going to tell you what the next blog will be. It's going to be rating 90s Black sitcoms out of 5 stars because I'm obsessed with Moesha and Girlfriends, and Netflix has taken too long to just like finally like now release them. I needed that when I was 12. But now that I have it, it's great. So yeah, I love my blog. If you're listening, please go check it out. It would mean
Yes.
the world.
Yes, definitely. And we will also include the link to that blog in the description of this video, so go check it out.
I think when we first started talking about including y'all on the podcast, we were going to have conversations about racism and the Black Lives Matter movement, which Ebony brought up. So, like, in regards to recent events, what are your thoughts, opinions, etc.?
Yeah, so I think there's just like this heavy feeling that's weighing on a lot of us right now, especially our BIPOC students. The fact, just the lackluster charge that only one of 3 officers was presented with yesterday in terms of the Breonna Taylor case. And for me at least, it's just super hard to be on social media, especially Instagram and Twitter, because I follow a lot of activist platforms and I see people protesting. I see people tweeting that Breonna Taylor's drywall got justice before she did. I see people still wanting to sign petitions, still wanting to reach out to the attorney's office. And there's just this helplessness, this feeling of helplessness um, now that that's the charge that he has. What can we do? So yeah, I'm feeling super just like disconnected from the rest of the world, especially as a Black woman myself.
I definitely agree with everything you said, Ebony. I think that I just feel tired. I think I feel tired to a point where I kind of feel nothing. Like I don't know, like it's just every day there's something new, like there's something different and like desolate and depressing and sad. And when you are just like oversaturated with all this hurt and trauma, it for me it gets to a point where like it's like numbing. Like I can't even process it or feel it anymore. And I think that the charge for the result of this Breonna Taylor case has kind of woken me up a bit, like kind of snapped me out of this very like numb phase that I've been in for a while. because sometimes it just gets too much, and now it's just like anger. Like it's just like this intense anger that I don't really know where to channel it. I mean, I can go to a protest, but at the same time, it's scary because a protest is not always a safe space for people. Like there are antagonists who are police, really, who are intentionally trying to break these protests, and so it just feels like there's nowhere to turn.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel that. I heard about the protest that's happening tomorrow, in Nubian Square, formerly known as Dudley Square, for people who just like don't know where that is. And I was planning on going, but yeah, I totally agree with you, Jasmine. It feels sort of, I don't know, it doesn't feel like a space that can remain safe and that can remain valued, especially when we have law enforcement that seem to just not care.
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. My roommates and I were actually talking about the protest at Nubian Square, and whether or not we should go, what are the risks, what are not the risks, etc. But I'm curious. So, for a lot of people in the United States, the conversation about race has been not as ongoing as it should have been, and was really just brought up during the George Floyd protests. But as Black women, it's been a conversation that you've had to experience and live through your entire lives. What are your thoughts on like the recent events versus like your entire lives being like this?
I mean, I think they're shallow. I mean, it's while I do appreciate people like kind of realizing, I guess, even though I don't understand like what makes you want to realize this now as opposed to the past 400 years, but I do appreciate people wanting to finally engage in these conversations. But at the same time, it's kind of overwhelming to feel like everyone suddenly cares about your life, but then no one actually wants to really do anything about it. Or when it becomes boring, they get tired of talking about it, or they're uninterested. Like this isn't
Hmm.
something you can just jump in, have fun for a little while, and just like tap out because you're done. Like if you're a Black person living in this country, it's not a choice. Like you live with this every day. You can choose not to talk about it, but it doesn't mean it won't affect you. And it's annoying. I would call it annoying, even though there's definitely better words to describe it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't care for the performative allyship at all. Like you will get unfollowed in a second. And that's exactly what was happening this summer. Like I basically cleansed my social media of almost everyone I went to high school with. And it wasn't because I personally like had a vendetta against these people, but most of them were, and I'm going to say it, anti-black. Um, and I went to a high school in East Boston, predominantly Hispanic and Latinx. So there was this overlap between being surrounded by POCs, um, but there was also this disconnect between what it means to be black. It's different to be a person of color and to be a black person of color. Those things are not interchangeable and those experiences are different. So when George Floyd was murdered and then I woke up the next morning and saw the same people who would call my ideas radical in the English discussion, third period, or and I saw the same people posting black screens for Blackout Tuesday, the same people who are in the hallways saying the N word and basically disregarding anything Black Lives Matter before that. I was surprised. I was shocked. I was bamboozled, to say the least. Like, I just didn't know where it was coming from. And I know for a fact that there is a lack of education there. And in saying that, I'm not saying that you can't one day be uneducated about the Black Lives Matter movement and about racial injustice, um, and the next day that you can learn from that. But I will say that if you are in that position, it, whether or not you're a person of color or not, it starts from education, and you can't just wake up one morning and repost what your best friend posted about Breonna Taylor or about Elijah McClain, or about George Floyd. You have to do the research and you have to do the work like the rest of us. Um, and as a Black woman myself, most of that work was inherited and most of that work was learned through experience. But I still get behind the computer every day and look up an article or read a law statute and see how I could make real change in the legal justice system, or in the criminal, as I like to call it, the criminal injustice system, because it's important work to do. So yeah, I don't care for the performative allyship at all.
Hmm. What do you think would be like a constructive way to raise awareness, spread information, or become more informed yourself? So, like for example, like you mentioned, the criminal injustice system. So conversations surrounding criminal justice reform. This, like at least on my social media feed, maybe mine's different, but then there's been discussions on how the law isn't really the best mechanism to create material change. What are your thoughts on that?
Directed at
Um,
Ebony or at me? Oh, go ahead.
Anyone,
Sorry.
anyone, honestly, go ahead.
I guess I can, well, I can answer. As a prospective lawyer and as someone who is an intern right now at a law firm, I care very much about the law and I care very much about reforming the law. In saying that, I recognize that the law, just because something is a law, does not make it inherently fair, just, or good in any way. Um, and I think that that's not the only avenue for change. And I'm seeing that on in my friends and on social media when I'm visiting these like social um, change platforms like the ACLU or the NAACP. Um, Getting out, sometimes it can start even in the home, if that makes sense. So, I personally, for me, I have had family members who maybe said things that were anti-Black at some point, or said things that were, quite frankly, a quote that I would associate with a conservative Republican, which is it, which may be fine in some contexts for other people, but it wasn't fine for me. So what I did was I started to educate my family members, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, especially people of older generations, just like telling them that when you can't just rely on media channels and the news to tell you everything about people who look like you, because in doing so you're implying that they're giving you the full story, and it's important to humanize Black lives instead of villainizing them. And I think that's what we see, especially when you're watching the news, which is why, quite frankly, I don't watch it anymore. I like to read my news. I don't watch it at all. It's because a protest can quickly become a riot to them, just like a murder can quickly become death, just regular death by chance. And that's not the case at all. So I started in the home. If you feel like the law is too far from where you are, or you feel like the law is untouchable, then start with the people around you.
I agree with that fully. I think one thing that ties back to what you were saying earlier, Ebony, about performative allyship is that if you really want to be an ally, well, one, being an ally is something that is earned. You can't just name yourself one. But if you really want to earn that title of being an ally, take what you learn and bring it back to people you're close to. Bring it back to your mom, your dad, your uncle, your racist grandma. Bring it back, because there's no need for you to just keep this information to yourself, because people who are not willing to step out and learn like you are, people who are okay with being bigoted, which might just be your family members, they're not going to take the effort of trying to learn. You did that effort. So we need you to take that back and talk to people who may not be in that sphere yet. I think if you are an ally and you don't try to do that, then you can't really call yourself an ally. So I think it's also on the reverse, where you can learn from your family members, but they also need to learn from you. Like, that's very important, because we need this to spread everywhere. It can't just be educated people talking to each other, or people who are empathetic talking to each other. Everyone needs to become a part of that circle of the conversation.
No, yeah, I agree wholeheartedly on that end. Melissa and I were actually talking before meeting with y'all about different ways in which we can uplift voices instead of, I suppose, controlling the conversation in some way. So I was wondering, actually, this is something I've been curious about in general. The term, like, y'all used BIPOC, by POC, yes? Okay.
Hmm.
So, like, I'm an Indigenous woman. I've always been so curious about this term because I started hearing about it in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder. I'm curious why the usage of the term. Like, what are your thoughts on the usage of the term since the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Elijah McClain was about Black people, and then the term Black Indigenous people of color started emerging. What are your thoughts about that?
Um, I actually just recently started hearing about BIPOC, like you said, after George Floyd was murdered. Sorry, I cannot speak. But I actually this is going again back to what Ebony said about the difference between black and person of color, because I used to use that interchangeably. Like if I would refer to myself as person of color, I guess I still do. But the experiences between black people and people of color, I think, are so different that you can't just summarize us all as people of color, because that also gives way for people of color to excuse their anti-blackness because, oh, I'm a person of color so I can't be racist. Like, no, we have to have some kind of stratification here, because it needs to be you need to be responsible for what you say. You can't just write it off, you saying the N word, oh, I'm a person of color, so I can say it. Like, no, it's if you're black, you can say it. It's not person of color. It's not, they're not synonyms. So I actually really do appreciate by POC more, because I feel like it emphasizes that yes, we're all a community, and yes, we should all be there for each other and have each other's backs, but we're not the same, and that's okay. We don't have to be the same.
Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. So I just recently learned what the term BIPOC really meant, and it's an umbrella term. You can be a Black person, an Indigenous person, or a person of color and fit under the BIPOC label. But there are many, many brackets underneath that, and I think people just overlook that. And I think it's a dangerous thing to do, because as important as every individual is in that term, every person that represents a BIPOC is important. Um, so I'm not going to invalidate that, but I think it becomes dangerous when you start to overlap the terms and say that, well, I've also experienced the same thing as you, so why are you complaining and I'm not? Or why can you have this protest and I can't? Or how come we're still talking about Black people when X, Y, and Z group are going through this? And I think it's important to give every group their respective space because they deserve it. Um, and I like me personally, I am an activist for every term under that fits into BIPOC, because literally everyone matters. Every non-white person of color, every non-white person, period, is going through something and is at a political and social disadvantage in the United States. So we need to recognize that. But that does not mean that when I post about Black Lives Matter, that you, as someone who does not identify as Black, can then DM me and say, well, what about this and what about that? Because yes, that's happening. So what do you want me to do about it? I I could also I know that that's happening. What are you doing about it besides saying that what I'm doing for Black people is unfair to you as a non-Black person? I don't know if that makes sense, but it's an experience that I've gone through where I sort of feel like I can't say or I can't defend one group without defending them all.
No, yeah, I actually agree with that. That's the reason why I'm a little critical of that term, because at least in my understanding, it was just Black and Indigenous people of color, not people of color, Black and Indigenous people as separate categories. And the reason why I criticized it is because I the missing murdered Indigenous women movement is completely separate from the Black Lives Matter movement. Even if they're both about police brutality, they happen in distinct ways, and I don't think there should be any sort of relationship between those two things. I feel like it's a little parasitic, the term in general. Just why I wanted your thoughts on that. Um, but bringing it back to Harvard, what are your experiences with racism or any approach to Black Lives Matter at Harvard?
Ooh. Thankfully, I don't feel like, well, I think that because I spend so much time in my dorm and I don't like, obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic has had like awful effects on campus life, but one of the pros is that I feel like I don't really have to engage with that many people. And because of that, I'm not like fearful of being targeted or of being um like subjugated by a professor or something like that, like having harmful things said to me. Not that they cannot be said over Zoom, but I just feel like people are a lot more bold in person. So I haven't had these experiences yet, although I do get stares like all the time. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just that beautiful, but I definitely get stares like all the time
Yes,
while I'm
a
walking.
queen.
I don't know. I think is that I come from an area that is very segregated. Like Chicago is arguably the most segregated city in America, and I went to a school that was majority black, and then that second majority being Latinx. It wasn't really. I never really engaged with a lot of white people before, so this definitely is a new environment for me. But I would say that it's been okay. It's been well. But that's speaking for myself. I'm not sure what anyone else, any other person of color or black person or whatever is going through in this campus. So far, I think that I'm okay, but I am very wary. I will say that.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, sort of similarly, I have not experienced any racism as of yet on Harvard's campus. Now, I know racism is everywhere, but on Harvard's campus, I have not had that experience yet. And I like what you said about that, Jasmine, how like on Zoom, people are less bold. And that's very true.
Hmm.
I feel sort of like this force field of protection on Zoom because the way that some of my discussions in class go, especially my government class and my memory wars class, where we like actively talk about police brutality and slavery and the effect that it has on the modern world, I will pop off in a class. I will. So I'm happy that I'm not in person because imagine me popping off in person in a lecture hall. Imagine that.
Too
Imagine it.
powerful.
So right. But now, if anything, honestly, I'm not afraid to leave a Zoom call. I'm not afraid to press that red button. Whenever I hear something that sounds just the least bit off. Um, so yeah, I'm definitely grateful for the Zoom platform because it's keeping me in check, but it's also keeping me like aware of who to avoid in person. If you said this on a Zoom call, I don't want to talk to you in person. No offense to them, but if the shoe fits.
Very true.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cause like I don't know, Harvard's a predominantly white institution, even though it has a lot of diversity still. So I was curious, like any conversation about like affirmative action have been brought up.
Not yet. Not yet, but I promise you it's coming.
Mm.
Also haven't
Um,
gotten oh, do you play sports yet? Surprised. Like, oh, what sport do you play? Very surprised I haven't gotten that yet.
wow. Yeah, I haven't had any real life conversations about affirmative action. I did watch this Michelle Obama interview though, where she talks about the different forms of affirmative action that people refuse to recognize. Like, yeah, as a black person, you may think that I got here because I play a sport. If I was a black man, because I play a sport, right? Or because I'm just like black in general. But what about legacy students? That's affirmative action. What about that? What if your grandparents and then your parents donated money to Harvard? That sounds like affirmative action to me. So I think there's a lot of ways in which affirmative action takes place. But I think as soon as when it comes down to Black people, especially, it's shunned upon for some reason. But no, I haven't had that conversation yet.
That's
Hmm.
fair. So like as of right now, you're enjoying your experience at Harvard. Very
Yeah,
great.
for sure.
Mhm, sure.
That's
I think really quickly going off of the point you brought up, Ebony, about legacy students and donor children, children of faculty and staff also having advantage in applications. Something I was thinking about, like right after I got into Harvard, and I was like, this is not real. Like, obviously, this is the worst mistake the school's ever made. But I was thinking about, and I was looking up statistics, and I think like if you're a legacy student, like there's a third chance you'll get in, or it's definitely like a significant boost.
like 35,
Yeah.
33%. I remember that
Mhm.
statistic.
Yeah, I saw that. I knew it's something like a third chance versus like the general 5% admission rate. And I think that it's so strange how people do not support affirmative action, but will have no problem with legacy students having that extreme advantage getting in when like yes, on everyone's application, there's something that's going to help them get in. Whether you came from a public school, whether you come from an underrepresented state like Hawaii or like Utah or Wyoming or something, whether you are a person of color, whether you are a legacy student or your parents are billionaires, like there's something on everyone's application that's going to kind of push them in one direction or another. But the thing about being Black, a person of color, Indigenous, and having that quote unquote advantage is that it's only an advantage in college apps. That's it. The rest of your life is a disadvantage. Like being a legacy student and being rich, and it's an advantage everywhere. Like it's never going to be a disadvantage to you if your parents are two Harvard professors or your parents gave $1 million to the school. Like not only is it helping you in your normal life, but it helps you in applications too. Like, do you not see the double privilege that you have? That's just ridiculous to me.
No, yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, like I've had so many conversations about affirmative action because I went to predominantly white high school, and everyone got really salty. Got into Harvard, so
As they should.
a lot of conversations there. Well, I'm glad we're all here though with affirmative action, despite affirmative action. Who knows? But I think this is a pretty good place to wrap up. Are we all good?
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Jasmine. And sorry, Ebony.
Oh no, I was just gonna say it was a great conversation.
Oh yeah. I was gonna say thanks so much, Jasmine and Ebony, for coming on the show. Really appreciate great discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is so much fun.
For your insight.
Thank you.
It was just amazing. So thank you guys. So yeah, signing off on Quarantine at Harvard.
Bye.